The Norfolk and Western classes Y6, Y6a, and Y6b were three classes of two 882 Mallet articulated steam locomotives built for the Norfolk and Western Railway in their Roanoke shops between 1936 and 1952. The 51 Y6 and Y6a, built between 1936 and 1942, were two 882 compound articulated standard gauge steam locomotives built at the Norfolk and Western's Roanoke shops. With a driver diameter of 58 inches, the locomotives had a full wheelbase of 103 feet 8 1/4 inches, the locomotive wheelbase being 58 feet, and a coupler-to-coupler length of 114 foot 10 1/2 inches. They were 15 feet 8 7/16 inches tall, with an adhesive weight of 522,850 pounds, a full locomotive weight of 582,900 pounds, and a tender weight of 143,200 pounds empty and 378,600 pounds loaded, for a total weight of 961,500 pounds, or 436.1 tons. They carried 30 tons of coal and 22,000 gallons of water in their tenders, but typically operated with an auxiliary tender or canteen in operation. They had a firebox grate area of 106.2 square feet and a total heating surface area of 371 square feet, a boiler pressure of 300 psi, and 4 Ashton 3.5-inch safety valves. They had a Type A superheater with a heating area of 1,775 square feet. As compound articulated engines, meaning they used steam twice, their cylinders were different sizes. They had 4 total: the 2 high-pressure 25-inch by 32-inch in the rear set of drivers, using it first, and the larger 39-inch by 32-inch cylinders on the front set, using it the second time. They were fitted with Baker valve gear. They had a max speed of 50 miles an hour with 5,600 horsepower, 4,400 as built, with a simple tractive effort of 166,000 pounds and a compound tractive effort of 126,838 pounds. The Y6s were numbered 2120 through 2154, picking up from the Y5 2882 Chesapeake types, and the Y6As numbered 2155 through 2170. During the 1930s, the mechanical engineering team at the Norfolk and Western were exploring different ways to refine the Y series of 2882 compound Mallets, since public demand for coal was increasing despite the Great Depression. In 1930 and 31, the Y5 class, as built in the Roanoke shops, which in and of themselves were a step-up design from the Y4, a derivative of the USRA 2882 from the First World War, otherwise known as the Y3s. But the Y5s were developed to the point that they were exclusively Norfolk and Western engines, having more Norfolk and Western design cues than the USRA Y3s. The N&W quickly decided to further develop the Y5 design to improve it. So from September 1936 to November 1940, they turned out 35 locomotives of the Y6 class. The Y6s shared identical specs with the Y5s, but the major changes were for improved efficiency. They were built with cast steel frames connected by a pin hinge. They had outside frame roller bearings on their leading and trailing trucks and roller bearings on all-wheel journals, along with automatic lubricators. The Y5s would actually be rebuilt to most of these modifications. The Y6s had 57-inch drivers as designed, but these were increased to 58 with thicker tires. Due to the bearings and lubricators, the amount of time and expense required to maintain the Y6s was akin to a diesel locomotive, at least a contemporary diesel locomotive, which is pretty impressive for an articulated steam engine. In 1942, the Norfolk and Western decided to build 16 more, 2155 through 2170. Since the Y6s proved to be so reliable, and with military traffic rapidly increasing, these engines were seen as a good investment. These would be classified as Y6a, as there were some slight differences from the previous Y6. They had improved Worthington BL2 feedwater heaters, an HT-type standard stoker, and had various parts made out of alternate material besides steel, since, there was a war on. The Y5s, Y6s, and Y6As were all assigned as all-purpose locomotives across the entire N&W system. They pulled everything from coal drags in the Blue Ridge Mountains to merchandise trains on the plains. They even operated as mine shifters on branch lines, heavy switchers in yards, and bankers on steep grades. One such assignment they received were the 6,600-ton westbound coal trains at a Cedar Bluff, over the Dry Fork Branch into Yeager, West Virginia. Here, these trains would get even longer, up to 14,500 tons, going to Williamson and Portsmouth, Ohio, and on to the Seattle division to Columbus or Cincinnati. They also took lighter 3,600-ton coal trains from Cedar Bluff to Bluefield, increasing to 10,300 tons before going on to Roanoke. Then on the Norfolk division, eastbound to Crewe, where the now smaller 8,000-ton train would be given to either a Z1 2662 or a Y3 2882 to continue to points near Norfolk. During the war, the Y6 and Y6As, along with the older Y3A and the Class A 2664s, were permitted to haul 14,500-ton coal trains on the Crewe-Lamberts Point route unassisted. Most of the N&W routes, though, had extremely steep grades that limited the size of trains even Y6As were allowed to pull before requiring a banker. On December 15, 1955, in Wytheville, Virginia, 2153 suffered a crown sheet failure and a subsequent boiler explosion, destroying the cab and blasting the smoke box door off of its hinges. In 1955 and 1956, the N&W realized what most railroads in the U.S. had by that point. Steam was expensive and inefficient. The first invaders began to appear. The RS-11s and the GP-9s began to take the job of the Malays. Some of the engines were demoted to mine shifter. In early April 1957, Stuart T. Saunders succeeded Robert H. Smith as president of the Norfolk and Western and decided to completely dieselize. Norfolk and Western 2156 is the only survivor, retired in July 1959 and donated by the railroad to the National Museum of Transportation in Kirkwood, Missouri, with Sanders personally presenting it. It's on static display there to this day. Between 2015 and 2020, it was leased to the Virginia Museum of Transportation in Roanoke, Virginia, where it appeared next to its two fellow Norfolk and Western big steam survivors, Class A 1218 and Class J 484 611, in its original hometown.